When I saw him standing in the rain, alive, I forgot how to breathe. He was thinner than I remembered, a ghost wearing Daniel's face. The same dark hair, though streaked with gray now. The same eyes, sharp as glass, staring at me like I was the one who'd disappeared. His clothes clung to him, soaked through, and the streetlight behind him painted him in a pale halo that made him look almost holy. Almost. I remember gripping the doorknob so tightly my knuckles went white. The house behind me was filled with laughter just a moment ago, the sound of Michael's friends celebrating our small, late wedding. The smell of roast chicken, candles, vanilla cake still hung in the air. And then came the knock. A simple knock. 3 times. Slow. When I opened the door, the night swallowed the warmth whole. "Anna," he said. Just my name. His voice cracked the same way it did when he used to whisper to me after nightmares. "Anna, it's me." For a second, I thought I was dreaming, one of those cruel dreams that visit after grief, when the mind tries to trick the heart. But I wasn't dreaming. I could smell the rain on him. The mud on his shoes. The faint scent of tobacco, the same cheap kind he used to hide in the garage. Behind me, the music faded. Someone had turned it off, sensing something was wrong. "Who is it, sweetheart?" Michael's voice floated in, warm, gentle, unaware. And I didn't know what to say. My dead husband was standing on my porch. That was the night everything I had rebuilt began to crack again. But before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand who I was before that knock. Before the rain, before the lies, before death became something that could be faked like a signature on a form. Because that's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't always come like lightning. Sometimes, it begins like a slow leak under the floorboards. Daniel and I met when I was 25, working the closing shift at a diner on the edge of town. He was older, 32, a carpenter with tired hands and a soft smile that could melt butter. He'd come in every Friday night, always sitting in the same booth, ordering the same thing, black coffee and apple pie, no ice cream. "You're too good for this place," he told me once, watching me wipe down a counter. "And you're too nosy for a stranger," I said back, but I smiled. By the 3rd week, he wasn't a stranger anymore. We married the next summer, in my aunt's backyard with string lights and mismatched chairs. We didn't have much, a small rented house, 1 rusty car, and too many dreams. But I was happy. God, I was happy. In the beginning, our life felt simple, honest. Mornings smelled like burnt toast and coffee that Daniel brewed too strong. Evenings meant sitting on the porch with lemonade and talking about everything we'd do, one day. He'd kiss my forehead and promise, "We'll make it, Anna. I just need time." But time, as I learned, can change a man. It started small, extra hours at work, late nights that turned into early mornings. He'd come home smelling of sawdust and sweat, sometimes whiskey. I told myself he was just tired, working too hard. Then the calls started. Short, whispered ones. If I entered the room, he'd hang up. "Just work," he'd say. "You worry too much." The worry came anyway. It crept in during quiet dinners, during the long silences between us. I still remember the last birthday we spent together. He'd forgotten. Came home past midnight, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking. I asked where he'd been. He didn't answer. Just held me for a long time and said, "You deserve better than me." I laughed then, thinking he meant it kindly. I didn't realize it was a confession. The day he disappeared, it was raining too. Funny how life circles back like that. He left for work one morning and never came home. His truck was found near the cliffs a few towns over, driver's door open, keys still in the ignition, wallet on the seat. They said it looked like he'd pulled over and walked straight into the sea. The police dragged the shoreline for days. No body. After 2 weeks, they said it plain, "We believe Daniel Klein is deceased." They handed me his wedding ring, found wedged in the seatbelt buckle, and a small plastic bag with his watch inside. That was all. I buried an empty coffin. The world became quiet. The house, colder. Nights stretched longer than they used to. People said I was strong. But what they didn't see were the mornings I sat in the kitchen, drinking his coffee, pretending he'd just run late again. The mind will build illusions just to survive. It took me nearly 3 years to let him go. When I met Michael, it wasn't fireworks. It was something softer. He was a kind man, a schoolteacher, patient, steady. He didn't try to fix me, didn't rush me. Just sat with me in the silences. Over time, I learned how to smile again, how to cook for two without crying over the empty chair. When he asked me to marry him, I said yes because it felt like peace, not excitement. And maybe, after all that chaos, peace was what I needed most. So that night, the night of our small wedding dinner, was supposed to be the start of something new. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. Because just as I was clearing the plates and laughing at something Michael said, the knock came. 3 times. And when I opened the door, there he was. Daniel. Alive. He took a step forward, and I stepped back. My voice caught in my throat. "You're supposed to be dead," I whispered. He gave a half-smile that wasn't a smile at all. "Yeah. I'm sorry about that." My heart thundered in my chest. The room behind me grew hushed, the sound of Michael's footsteps coming closer. "Anna?" I turned, just enough to see Michael standing there in his crisp white shirt, a confused look on his face. Daniel's gaze shifted to him. Then to the gold band on my hand. "Oh," he said softly. "So it's true." And in that moment, the air between us was heavy with a silence that felt like judgment from God himself. That's how the past came back, wet, shaking, and breathing. That's how my new life began to crumble, one heartbeat at a time. Before that night, before Daniel returned like a shadow from another life, our days had found a quiet rhythm again. Michael and I lived in a little yellow house at the end of Cedar Lane, the kind of street where everyone waves from their porch and knows who baked what pie for the church fundraiser. There was nothing grand about our life, but it was gentle, the kind of gentle that feels like healing after too many storms. Every morning, Michael would hum some old tune while making breakfast, his voice deep and steady. He liked his eggs over easy, always broke one yolk by mistake, and cursed softly under his breath when he did. I'd make the coffee, 1 sugar for him, black for me. We'd eat by the window, where the morning light spilled across the table and made the dust dance in the air. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Some nights, we'd walk down to the lake behind the house, bare feet sinking into the cool grass. Michael would skip stones. I'd count how many times they bounced before they sank. He'd wrap his arm around me and say, "You don't talk much about before. That's okay. We can start from here." He never pushed, never asked for stories about Daniel. And for that, I loved him a little more. I told myself that part of my life, that first love, that first heartbreak, was buried for good. Daniel, back then, had been like fire, bright, consuming, impossible to hold for long. I met him when I was still learning what love should and shouldn't feel like. We didn't have much, but he made everything feel like an adventure. A late-night drive just to see the stars. Dancing barefoot in the kitchen to the crackle of an old radio. He had a way of making promises sound like poetry. "I'll build us a house one day," he used to say, his eyes shining with that restless kind of hope. "One with a porch big enough for your plants and my dreams." And I believed him. Because when you love someone like that, you don't question the edges. You fill in the blanks with faith. But dreams, I've learned, can rot when money gets tight and pride gets loud. We started falling behind, rent, bills, his business loans. I picked up extra shifts at the diner, and Daniel started talking about opportunities, vague and half-whispered. When I asked, he brushed it off. "Don't worry about it, Anna. I've got it under control." Except he didn't. I didn't know it then, but he'd borrowed money from people who don't care about good intentions. Men who showed up at the house once, all leather jackets and quiet threats. I only saw them that one time, but it was enough to know we were in trouble. When I confronted Daniel, he said, "Just a setback, babe. I can fix it." But his eyes, they didn't look like someone who could fix anything anymore. The weeks before his disappearance were strange. He'd wake in the middle of the night, pacing by the window. The phone would ring, and he'd leave to clear his head. I'd wake up to find his side of the bed cold, the front door unlocked. One night, I followed him. It was late, past midnight. I remember the crickets, the smell of wet asphalt. He drove out toward the cliffs, where the ocean roared against the rocks like it was trying to swallow the land whole. I parked far enough behind to stay hidden. He sat there in his truck for a long time, head bowed. When he finally got out, he threw something into the sea. I couldn't see what. Maybe his phone, maybe his guilt. Then he just stood there, staring at the waves. I almost got out of the car, almost called his name. But something told me not to. Something about the stillness in his posture, the way the headlights painted him like a man about to step off the edge. The next morning, he was gone. Grief is a strange thing. People think it's one emotion, sadness, but it's not. It's confusion, anger, denial, longing, all tangled together. In the months after Daniel's death, I moved through life like a ghost. The house became a museum of him, his boots by the door, his tools in the shed, his shirt still folded in the drawer. I couldn't bring myself to touch them. Some nights, I'd hear the wind rattle the back door, and I'd sit up, thinking it was him. My body still expected him to come home. It's cruel, the way memory tricks the senses. My mother told me to sell the house, to start over somewhere else. "You're too young to waste your life in that tomb," she said. But I couldn't. That little house held the only proof that he'd ever loved me, or so I thought. It took almost 2 years before I could smile without feeling like I was betraying him. And then came Michael. We met at a literacy drive for the local elementary school. I was there volunteering, mostly just handing out coffee and trying not to be noticed. Michael was reading aloud to the kids, his voice soft, full of warmth. I remember thinking, he sounds like safety. He noticed me before I noticed him. After the event, he walked up, coffee cup in hand, and said, "You look like someone who prefers the quiet corner over the crowd." I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in years. He asked me to dinner. I said no, twice. Then yes, once. Michael didn't have Daniel's charm. He wasn't reckless or mysterious. He was steady, a man who planned, who showed up when he said he would, who didn't leave me wondering where he was at night. He brought color back into my world, one meal, one walk, one quiet conversation at a time. When he proposed, he didn't make a grand speech. He just said, "I'd like to spend the rest of my life making sure you don't have to look over your shoulder anymore." That was enough. So on that rainy evening, when Daniel came back from the dead, it wasn't just my peace he shattered, it was my second chance. I can still see the expression on Michael's face that night. The confusion first, then disbelief, and finally something that broke my heart, fear. Fear that the woman he'd built his life with wasn't really his at all. And in a way, he wasn't wrong. Because when Daniel said my name that night, something inside me stirred, not love, not longing, but recognition. Like a ghost had whispered, "You're not done yet." The morning after Daniel appeared, I woke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the tense, waiting kind. Michael had already gone to work. He left a note on the kitchen table, written in his careful handwriting. "Didn't want to wake you. We'll talk tonight. Rest. I love you." The words "I love you" looked lonely on the page. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world still felt heavy. I made coffee out of habit, but it tasted like metal on my tongue. Every sip burned a little, maybe because my hands wouldn't stop trembling. There was no way to make sense of it. Daniel, my dead husband, alive after 5 years. When I closed my eyes, I could still see him on the porch, soaked to the bone, staring at me like time hadn't moved for him. But it had. God, it had. I'd built an entirely new life in his absence. He'd asked me, that night, if he could come in. Just for a minute, he said. I need to explain. But Michael was there, standing just a few feet behind me, and everything in me screamed no. So I told Daniel to leave. Whatever this is, I said, my voice shaking, you need to stay away from this house. He nodded, but there was something in his eyes, not guilt, not fear, but something sharper. Desperation, maybe. And before he turned to go, he said quietly, you were never supposed to see me again, Anna. Then he walked back into the dark. Now, in the pale light of morning, those words kept echoing. Never supposed to see me again. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the old ring I still kept in a drawer. I'd never been able to throw it away. His wedding band, returned by the police, dull and cold. I turned it over in my hand, wondering whose idea it was, his or fate's, that I should be holding this thing at all. By noon, the world outside had gone about its business as if nothing had changed. Cars passed, dogs barked, children laughed on their way home from school. But my world had tilted. I didn't know where to start. The police? A lawyer? Or maybe a psychiatrist, because surely no one could just come back like that. So I drove. Not to the police, not to anyone. Just drove. The old road to the cliffs was cracked and overgrown now. 5 years ago, it had been sealed off for safety after Daniel's accident. But there was a dirt path that wound down to the water. I parked and walked, each step sinking into damp earth. The ocean roared the same way it had that night. Angry, relentless. I stood there for a long time, watching the waves crash against the rocks. What did you do, Daniel? I whispered. There was no answer, only the wind and the distant cry of gulls. When I came home, Michael was in the living room. He'd changed out of his work clothes but still looked stiff, like he hadn't relaxed all day. He didn't turn when I entered. Just said, he came back. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said softly. He turned then, eyes searching mine. Is he, what, trying to come back to you? I don't know. Do you want him to? That stopped me cold. I shook my head, but it didn't feel like enough. Michael, I buried him. I mourned him. I built a life with you. Whatever he's doing, it's not about love. He looked down at his hands, the gold band catching the lamplight. You should tell the police. I will. But I didn't. Not yet. Because some part of me needed to understand why. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house sounded like a footstep. Every car that passed made me sit up, heart pounding. At 2 a.m., I went to the kitchen for water. The backyard light was on. I hadn't turned it on. When I peered through the window, I froze. There was something, someone, by the fence. A shadow moving, slow, careful. I stepped back, pressing my hand over my mouth. For a moment, I thought I saw him, Daniel, watching the house. But when I blinked, the yard was empty again. I turned off the light and locked the door, my pulse thudding in my ears. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was guilt. But deep down, I knew it wasn't either of those things. The next day, I went into town. I thought maybe I could find out if anyone else had seen him. In a place like ours, secrets travel fast, but truth moves slow. At the grocery store, I caught snippets of whispers near the checkout line. Did you hear? They say she saw him. Alive. Poor thing's probably lost her mind. I felt their eyes on me as I passed. That's the thing about small towns, they don't need proof, only a good story. By afternoon, I drove to the motel on Route 6, a place Daniel used to stay when work took him out of town. I didn't expect anything. Maybe I just needed to feel like I was doing something. The clerk behind the counter was a young man with tired eyes. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes," I said, sliding Daniel's old photo across the counter. "Have you seen this man?" He looked at it for a second, then frowned. "He was here a few nights ago. Room 12. My breath caught. "Still here?" He shook his head. "Checked out yesterday morning. Left in a hurry, too. Didn't even take his bag. Said he'd be back for it." My heart started pounding. "Can I see the room?" The clerk hesitated. "We already cleaned it, but..." I must have looked desperate because he finally handed me a key. Room 12 smelled faintly of cigarettes and old rain. The curtains were half drawn. On the table sat a small paper bag, damp around the edges. Inside, a half-empty pack of his brand of cigarettes, a cracked lighter, and a folded envelope with my name on it. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Anna. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't do what I planned. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought disappearing was the only way. But things got worse, not better. I need your help. I'll find you again when it's safe. D." I sat down on the edge of the bed, the paper trembling in my hands. The words didn't make sense. When it's safe? Safe from who? I should have gone straight to the police then. But my mind didn't work like that anymore. It was spinning, drowning in old memories and new fears. All I could think was, he was alive, and still lying. And whatever he wanted now, it wasn't just forgiveness. That night, I hid the letter in my dresser drawer and told Michael nothing. Because deep down, I needed to uncover the truth myself, before it destroyed everything again. I didn't tell Michael about the letter right away. I told myself it was to protect him, to buy time until I knew what Daniel really wanted, but the truth was simpler, and uglier. I didn't want to see the look in his eyes again. The one from that night. The one that said, "What else haven't you told me?" So, I folded the letter, slid it between an old sweater and a photo album, and pretended my life hadn't been shaken off its hinges. But it had. Every morning, I'd check the porch, half expecting another knock. Every shadow outside the window made my pulse race. And yet, under the fear, there was something else I couldn't name, a restlessness, a gnawing curiosity. 5 years of grief had left behind more than sadness. It had left questions. And now, I had a chance to get answers. A week passed before I saw him again. It was a Thursday evening, near sunset. I'd gone to pick up groceries, taking the long way home through the old part of town. That's when I saw him, standing across the street by the hardware store, hands in his pockets, watching me. For a moment, I thought about pretending not to notice. But when our eyes met, I couldn't look away. He didn't move toward me. Didn't wave. Just nodded, a small, hesitant motion, like a man trying to ask for permission without words. I pulled into a side street and parked. My hands were shaking when I got out. We met halfway, in that half-lit strip of sidewalk between day and night. "Daniel," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked older, rougher. A faint scar ran along his jaw. There was exhaustion in his eyes, the kind that comes from running too long. "I shouldn't have come back," he said. "Then why did you?" He glanced around before answering. "Because I had no choice." We sat in my car, engine off, windows fogging slightly from our breath. He told me pieces, never the whole story, just enough to hook me into listening. After that accident, he said, he'd gone into hiding. Claimed it wasn't planned, not at first. He'd driven out to the cliffs that night, thinking about how trapped he felt, the debts, the threats, the shame. Then, as he watched the waves, an idea took hold. "If everyone thought I was dead," he said quietly, I could start over. I stared at him, stunned. You mean you chose to disappear? He nodded. I thought it'd be better for you. Safer. Safer? My voice cracked. Daniel, they found your truck. Your wallet. Your ring. Do you have any idea what that did to me? He looked down at his hands. I thought it'd be easier than you knowing the truth. What truth? He hesitated, jaw tightening. That I owed money. Bad people. They threatened you, Anna. Said they'd come after you if I didn't pay. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something about the way he said it, rehearsed, careful, didn't sound like fear. It sounded like justification. So you faked your death, I said slowly. And left me to bury an empty coffin. His eyes met mine. I didn't mean for it to be forever. I laughed, bitter. And when exactly were you planning to come back? After I'd moved on? Married again? He flinched, and I saw it, that flicker of something dark in his expression. Possession. You married him, he said, his tone tightening. You really married him. I thought you were dead, Daniel. What did you expect me to do? He didn't answer. Just stared ahead, his jaw clenched. Who is he? He asked finally. This Michael. I didn't reply. Because in that moment, I realized what this really was, not guilt, not love. It was control. The same quiet, consuming kind that used to make me shrink in my own home. Daniel hadn't changed. He'd just learned how to hide better. That night, I came home late. Michael was waiting on the porch, worry etched into every line of his face. You were supposed to be home hours ago, he said, voice calm but tight. I went for a drive, I replied. Anna, I'm trying to be patient. I really am. But I need to know what's going on. I hesitated, then said, I saw him. Michael froze. Daniel? I nodded. His shoulders dropped, a mix of disbelief and dread. What does he want? I don't know yet. He rubbed his face. You should tell the police before he drags you into whatever trouble he's in. I knew he was right. But I also knew the police couldn't erase what Daniel had already set in motion, the whispers, the doubt, the fear spreading like ink through our quiet town. And deep down, part of me needed the truth. The next day, I drove back to the motel. The clerk was gone, replaced by a woman who eyed me with suspicion when I asked about Daniel's room. Checked out for good, she said. Didn't leave a forwarding address. But she hesitated, then added, he left this behind. She handed me a small notebook, water-stained and frayed at the edges. Inside were pages filled with names, numbers, and addresses, none of which I recognized. But one stood out. A local storage facility, with a unit number scribbled beside it. Unit 47B. The next afternoon, I drove there. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might bruise my ribs. The air inside the facility was cold and smelled of oil and dust. When I found the unit, the padlock was broken, hanging loose. Inside, boxes stacked high, some labeled with his handwriting. Old photographs. Tools. Papers. And tucked in one corner, a duffel bag half open, stuffed with cash. 10s, 20s, 50s, all bundled tight. And next to it, a single photograph. It was of me. Taken through the window of our house. My knees almost gave out. I backed away, hand over my mouth, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. That was the moment I understood, Daniel hadn't come back because it was safe. He'd come back because it wasn't. And now, he wasn't running from danger, he was bringing it straight to my door. That night, I finally told Michael everything, the letter, the meeting, the storage unit. He listened quietly, but I could see the fear building behind his calm. When I finished, he said, Anna, we need to call someone. This isn't just about you anymore. I nodded. But inside, something told me the damage was already done. Because when I went to check the dresser later that night, the letter, Daniel's letter, was gone. Someone had already been inside our house. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind, felt like footsteps. Like Daniel was somewhere in the dark, waiting. Michael slept on the couch, insisting he'd keep watch. I sat in the armchair by the window, staring into the yard. The porch light flickered now and then, the kind of flicker that makes your heart skip with every dimming. At one point, I thought I saw movement near the edge of the trees, a figure, maybe. But when I blinked, it was gone. By dawn, my eyes burned from exhaustion, but my mind was sharper than it had been in days. Fear has a strange way of clearing the fog. I was done waiting for Daniel to come knocking again. If he wanted to play ghosts, I would become a hunter. The first thing I did that morning was drive to the police station. Michael wanted to come, but I told him I needed to do it alone. Maybe I didn't want him to see me as someone who had once loved a man capable of all this. The officer on duty, Officer Merrow, was young, polite, and skeptical. "So you're saying your husband faked his death," he repeated, typing something into the computer. "And now he's, what, stalking you?" "I'm saying he's alive," I said firmly. "And yes, he's been near my house. He left me a letter. I found a storage unit with money and surveillance photos of me." He frowned. "Do you have the letter?" "No. It's gone. Someone took it from my home." His brow furrowed deeper. "Any signs of forced entry?" "No. Anyone else have access to your house?" I hesitated. "Just my husband. My current husband." He nodded slowly, jotting down notes. "All right, ma'am. I'll file a report. But until we confirm his identity, there's not much we can do. If you see him again, don't approach. Call us." The words, "not much we can do," echoed in my head the whole drive home. Because that's what everyone had said the first time too, after Daniel's truck was found, after they dragged the shore for a body that wasn't there. When I got home, Michael was pacing the kitchen. "How did it go?" he asked. "They'll look into it." I made air quotes with my fingers. His jaw tightened. "That's not enough." "I know." We sat at the table in silence for a long moment. Then he reached across, covering my hand with his. "We'll figure this out, okay? Together." I nodded, but inside I felt the old instinct stirring, that urge to handle things alone. Because Daniel had always taught me, in his quiet, manipulative way, that asking for help meant weakness. And old lessons die hard. That evening, I drove back to the storage facility. I parked a block away and waited until dusk, when the workers left and the security lights flickered on. I wore a hoodie, gloves, and my oldest sneakers. Funny how easily fear makes you think like a criminal. I wasn't looking for money this time. I was looking for answers. I slipped inside, retraced my steps to Unit 47B, and scanned through the boxes more carefully. In one folder, I found a stack of receipts, all recent. Motel stays, gas stations, meals paid in cash. All under a fake name, David Klein. Close enough to his real one to be lazy. But one receipt caught my eye. It was for a wire transfer, a large one, sent to a name I didn't recognize. And the date was just 3 days before he showed up at my door. So he wasn't just hiding. He was dealing. I took photos of everything with my phone, stuffed the papers back, and turned to leave. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Deliberate. I froze. "Anna." His voice slid through the air like a knife through cloth. I turned, and there he was, standing in the doorway, blocking the only exit. "Daniel," I breathed. He stepped closer, the dim light catching on his face. You shouldn't have come here. Neither should you. He sighed, running a hand through his wet hair. You don't understand what you're getting into. Then explain it. He shook his head. It's not safe. Stop saying that. My voice cracked. You keep talking about safety like it's something you're protecting me from, but you're the one showing up at my house, taking letters, leaving photos. What are you doing? He looked genuinely pained. I didn't take the letter. I swear. But if you still have it, you need to destroy it. Why? Because they're watching me, he said, glancing over his shoulder. And if they think you're involved. Who's they, Daniel? He didn't answer. Just grabbed my arms suddenly, hard enough to make me flinch. You have to trust me, he said urgently. Everything I did was to protect you. I stared at him, this man who once promised to build me a home, now standing before me as a stranger carved out of secrets and fear. I did trust you, I said, my voice low. And you buried that trust with your empty coffin. He let go, eyes darkening. For a heartbeat, I thought he might say something, an apology, a plea. But instead, he just stepped back and said, then it's too late. And before I could ask what he meant, he was gone again, melting into the dark like a man who'd never been real. When I got home, Michael was waiting outside. His face was pale. Where have you been? He demanded. I hesitated. The storage unit. His jaw clenched. You went alone? I had to. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling hard. Anna, I don't know what scares me more, that he's out there or that you keep running toward him. I wanted to explain, to tell him that this wasn't about Daniel anymore, it was about me, about reclaiming control of a story I never got to finish. But before I could speak, he held up a hand. Someone came by, he said. My stomach dropped. Who? He looked at me, his voice low. A man. Said his name was Mr. Carter. Asked if Daniel Klein lived here. Did you tell him anything? Of course not. But, Anna, he knew your name. That was the moment I realized Daniel hadn't lied about everything. There really were people looking for him. And now, because he'd come back, they were looking for me too. That night, I packed a bag. Just essentials, clothes, my passport, the photos that mattered. Michael wanted to go to a hotel, somewhere safe, but I knew nowhere would be safe until we understood what Daniel had done. I made one last call before we left, to Officer Merrow. Told him about the man who'd come by, about the photos, about the storage unit. He promised to send someone in the morning. But morning never came quietly in my life anymore. Because as we pulled out of the driveway, headlights appeared in the rearview mirror, 2, then 4. Someone was following us. And in that moment, it didn't matter who it was, Daniel or the people he was running from. All I knew was that I was done being a victim. When the story broke, it spread faster than I could catch my breath. It started with whispers, at the grocery store, at church, even in the small cafe where I used to work weekends. Then it turned into headlines. Local woman's husband returns from the dead, alleged fraud investigation underway. They made it sound sensational, almost cinematic. But living it felt nothing like that. It was messy. Humiliating. Our phone rang constantly. Reporters. Old neighbors. Even Daniel's sister, who hadn't spoken to me in years. Everyone wanted a quote, a story, a reaction. The police had arrested him 2 days after the chase, after they caught him at a gas station outside town, trying to cross the county line. He didn't resist. Didn't fight. Just raised his hands like a man who was finally too tired to run. They found nearly $50,000 in cash in his trunk, along with fake IDs, and enough documents to prove what I already knew. Daniel had built a life of lies while I mourned him. He'd scammed lenders, taken illegal loans, and used my name as a false reference on half of them. When the police showed me the paperwork, my signature stared back at me, perfect, precise. Forged. For the first few days, I couldn't step outside without feeling the eyes on me. Pity from some. Judgment from others. The kind of looks that said, she must have known. Michael stood by me at first, calm, composed. He told people to mind their own business, told me to focus on moving forward. But I could see it in his face, the quiet disappointment that lingered no matter how hard he tried to hide it. Because betrayal doesn't just come from one direction. It ripples, touches everything. I'd spent years grieving Daniel, then months building a life with Michael. And now, both lives were cracking under the same name. The first court hearing was a circus. Cameras flashing, microphones shoved into my face. I wore black, not for mourning, but for armor. Daniel sat on the other side of the courtroom, handcuffed, thinner than I remembered, eyes hollow. When they read out the charges, fraud, identity theft, obstruction, he didn't look at the judge. He looked at me. And for a moment, the world fell away. It was just us. His gaze was heavy, searching, like he was still trying to find the woman who once believed every word he said. But she was gone. After the hearing, reporters followed me out. "Mrs. Klein, did you know he was alive? Are you pressing charges? Will your current husband stay with you?" Their questions cut sharper than any knife. I didn't answer. Just kept walking. It wasn't until we reached the car that Michael spoke. "They won't let this go," he said quietly. "I know." He stared straight ahead, hands tight on the steering wheel. Part of me wants to punch him. I smiled faintly. You and half the town. But the truth was, there was no anger left in me, not the kind that burns hot, anyway. Just the cold kind. The kind that seeps in slow, dull, and permanent. In the weeks that followed, my life became a careful balancing act. Police interviews. Lawyers' calls. Endless forms to clear my name from his mess. At night, when Michael would go to bed, I'd sit by the window and watch the moonlight stretch across the yard. The same yard where Daniel had once stood in the rain, alive and haunting. Sometimes I wondered what made a person fake their death. Was it fear? Cowardice? Or just the easy way out of a hard life? And then I'd remember the photo, the one of me, taken through the window. No. It wasn't fear. It was ownership. He'd always wanted control. Even after death, he found a way to have it. One morning, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a single line, written in familiar handwriting. "I told you I did it to protect you." There was no signature. I stared at the page until the words blurred. Then I folded it, placed it in a drawer, and locked it away with everything else he'd ever given me. Because I'd learned something important: some people don't deserve your hate or your love. They deserve your absence. Michael began to withdraw after that. He tried to hide it, longer work hours, polite smiles, empty reassurances, but I could feel the space growing between us. One evening, as we sat on the porch in silence, he finally said it. "I don't know how to be part of this story, Anna." I turned to him. "You don't have to be." He sighed, his expression soft but tired. "You've been through hell. You don't need me dragging my own confusion into it." I wanted to tell him he wasn't dragging anything, that he was the one steady thing left. But the truth was, I understood. Some love stories end not with anger, but with quiet exhaustion. We separated a few weeks later. No fights, no final scenes. Just two people who had tried to build something beautiful on ground still haunted by ghosts. The day of Daniel's sentencing, I went alone. He didn't look surprised to see me there. If anything, he seemed relieved. When the judge asked if I had anything to say before sentencing, I stood up. My voice was calm, steady. "I don't have a statement, Your Honor," I said. "I just want my name back." Daniel didn't lift his eyes. He was sentenced to 5 years. Not nearly enough, but it was something. As they led him out, he looked back one last time. There was no smirk, no apology. Just a quiet nod, as if he finally accepted the ending he'd written for both of us. Afterward, I walked out of that courthouse into the afternoon light. For the first time in years, the air felt clean. No ghosts. No whispers. Just silence. And I realized something: silence doesn't always mean loneliness. Sometimes, it's peace finally finding its way home. The months after Daniel's sentencing moved slowly, not like time before, when life felt like a rushing river carrying me from one heartbreak to another. This was different. It was quiet. Steady. Like the world had finally stopped spinning, and I was learning how to stand again. I stayed in the little yellow house on Cedar Lane. Some people told me to sell it, to move somewhere fresh, away from the whispers and the memories, but I couldn't. The house had seen all of me, the girl who believed in forever, the widow who buried an empty coffin, the wife who tried again, and the woman who finally learned to let go. And somehow, I needed to stay. To prove that this time, I wouldn't run from the wreckage. So, I started over, slowly, almost tenderly. I cleared out the shed where Daniel used to keep his tools. I donated most of them, kept only one hammer, the one with his initials carved into the handle. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder. A reminder that love built on fear is never a home. I went back to work at the diner, part-time at first. The first day I walked in, I felt the weight of every stare, every whisper. "That's her," someone murmured near the counter. But after a while, the curiosity faded. People have short attention spans, even for tragedy. I smiled, poured coffee, and took orders like I used to. The routine became a kind of healing. There's something grounding about small kindnesses: the smell of bacon sizzling on the grill, the sound of someone laughing over pie, the clink of coins in the tip jar. Life reduced to little, manageable pieces. One afternoon, I noticed a small family sitting in the booth where Daniel used to sit: a man, a woman, and their young son sharing a slice of apple pie. The boys' laughter rang across the diner, clear and bright. For a moment, I just stood there, tray in hand, heart full of something that wasn't sadness anymore. Maybe acceptance. Maybe peace. I saw Michael again, months later. He came by to return some books I'd left at his place. He looked the same, calm, collected, but his eyes held a softness that hadn't been there before. "I heard the cafe got new owners," he said. "They're lucky to have you back." I smiled. "They mostly have me for the night shifts. Guess I'm more of a moonlight person now." He chuckled quietly. "You always were." There was a comfortable silence between us then. Not the strained kind we'd lived in before, but a gentle one, like an old song you still know the words to. Before he left, he said, "I hope you're finding some peace." "I am," I said. "More than I thought I would." He smiled, nodded, and that was it. No dramatic goodbyes. Just two people who once loved each other, finally setting that love down where it couldn't hurt anymore. A few weeks later, I planted a garden. It started small, just herbs and wildflowers near the fence. But soon, it grew into something lush and alive. Tomatoes, marigolds, lavender. The kind of garden that hums quietly in the morning sun. Every time I stepped outside to water it, I felt something shift in me, a soft, forgiving rhythm. One morning, while pruning the roses, I found myself talking to the air, as if Daniel could hear me. "I hope you find peace too," I said. "Wherever you are." The words didn't feel like weakness. They felt like freedom. Sometimes I still dream of him, not the Daniel who faked his death, or the man who returned to ruin what I'd rebuilt, but the boy from the diner. The one who laughed over apple pie and promised me a porch full of flowers. In those dreams, I don't hate him. I just watch him fade. Because forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about saying it's okay. It's about saying it's over. Life didn't become perfect after that. bills still piled up. The roof still leaked when it rained. But I found joy in small things, in a good cup of coffee, in handwritten letters from my mother, in the laughter of the children who passed by on their way to school. I started journaling again. Writing, not for anyone else, but for me, to remember how far I'd come. To remind myself that even after the kind of betrayal that splits your soul open, there's still beauty in being alive. Some evenings, I sit on the porch with a cup of tea and watch the sunset spill over the garden. The light touches everything gently, even the old, chipped fence. And I think, maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting. Not pretending. Just letting the light touch the broken places without flinching. One Sunday, after church, a woman approached me in the parking lot. She looked nervous, holding a small notebook against her chest. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I know you don't know me. I saw your story on the news months ago. I went through something similar. Not exactly, but betrayal, loss. I just wanted to say, thank you. For surviving." I smiled, touched. "You don't have to thank me for that." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You showed me that it's possible. To rebuild. To not stay angry forever." Her eyes filled with tears, and I saw myself, the woman I used to be, in her face. I hugged her before she could say anything else. "Pain doesn't get smaller," I said softly. "We just grow bigger around it." She nodded, whispered thank you, and walked away. And for the first time in years, I felt proud of my scars. I still keep the small hammer on my windowsill. Every now and then, I pick it up and run my fingers over the carved initials. It doesn't hurt anymore. It just reminds me that I built something new from the ruins, and this time, it's mine alone. The past will always be part of me. But it no longer defines me. And maybe that's the quiet miracle of surviving what should have broken you. You come out not unscarred, but whole in a different way. Sometimes, I still think about that knock on the door, the one that changed everything. If I could go back to that moment, I don't know what I'd do differently. Maybe I'd still open it. Maybe I'd still let the rain and ghosts and heartbreak pour in. Because as much as it destroyed, it also revealed. It showed me what I was made of. People always talk about betrayal like it's a single wound. But it's not. It's a slow unraveling of trust, thread by thread, until you're standing in front of the mirror, wondering who you are without the person you once loved. For a long time, I thought Daniel's return had ruined me. But now, I see it differently. He didn't ruin me. He revealed me. He showed me the parts of myself that could still choose love after loss, still find beauty after truth shattered everything I believed. Because strength isn't loud. It doesn't come from revenge or anger. It comes from standing quietly in the ashes and saying, I am still here. Sometimes, I sit on the porch at night and watch the rain fall, the same kind of rain that used to terrify me. It no longer feels like grief. It feels like cleansing. And when thunder rolls in the distance, I whisper a small prayer, not for him, not even for me, but for anyone who's ever had to start over after a love that lied. If you're listening to this and you've been broken, I want you to remember this. Your story doesn't end where someone else's deception begins. You are allowed to rebuild. You are allowed to outgrow your pain. And one day, when the storm finally passes, you'll realize, peace was never gone. It was just waiting for you to be ready. Would you have opened that door? Or would you have let the past stay buried where it belonged? Tell me in the comments, loves. And if my story found a piece of you tonight, don't forget to subscribe. Stay a while. We heal together here.